What's going on, everybody? It's KRYPTONIAN saying here, bringing you guys another review for Chainsaw Man chapter 124. And now that chapter 124 is done in the books, we got a lot to talk about because Asa Mitaka's development in this chapter is another example of how Fujimoto is continuing to strip down Mitaka's character in order to add more layers to it in the future. And it also, by extension, shows us that Yoru is looking after Mitaka for more than just her own survival's sake. This chapter is further planting the seeds that Yoru might actually start to be growing some attachments to Mitaka, which is going to be huge moving forward into Chainsaw Man Part 2. But with the initial thoughts out of the way, let's back things up and let's dive into the recap and review portion of the review itself. So the chapter opens up with Yoru screaming at Mitaka to get a grip, and we see how quick-witted Yoru is because she realizes that Asa's fear is the main thing that is making their situation as bad as it is. So Yoru tricks Asa into sacrificing her own nail in order to turn it into a nail knife, which one gives Yoru another weapon, but it also confirms her suspicion about the situation they're currently in. If she can get Mitaka to focus on not the traumas of her past, like thinking about her cat drowning at the bottom of the river all those years ago, but instead focus on the pain that her body is feeling, that should be enough to overcome the effects of the falling devil's powers, which it makes a lot of sense. Here's why. Pain can be used as a way to overcome shock and fear because induced pain can trigger that survival instinct inside the body and heighten all the senses, which is exactly what Yoru needs at this moment. Yoru also begins rattling off the names of several devils until she comes to the conclusion that this is a primal devil and that it's the falling devil, but she's unsure as to why the falling devil is here, and she even questions if Fami has anything to do with it, which now makes that conversation we had a few chapters ago back with Yoshida and with Fami feel like something that we're gonna have to circle back to at some point in the future. Yoru stresses to Asa to only focus on thinking about the pain and not her own trauma, going so far as to inflict another fresh wound on Mitaka's body to give her something to think about, but Mitaka manages to push Yoru out for a moment, which results in her succumbing to the effects of the falling devil yet again. Yoru calls Mitaka an idiot for not trusting her, stating that she's trying to keep Mitaka alive and that by not trusting her, she's putting herself in jeopardy, which is now another interesting observation that we can make. Surface level, the expression "the devil you know" is better than the one that you don't know, which, yes, I know that's a bad choice of words given we're talking about literal devils here, but that expression still applies here in so many ways. Logically speaking, Mitaka has more reason to work with the devil that shares the body with her and not fear that devil, but instead reserve that fear for the falling devil. But in reality, she's turned her fear towards Yoru, and this is where Fujimoto shows off some of his brilliance in character writing. He's stripping down Mitaka in front of our very eyes, and it's for a few different reasons. He first has Mitaka lash out at Yoru from saying that she takes over her body to do as she wishes, and then focuses on cutting her hand, which is a minuscule thing to get worked up over. But if you've been in an argument with people that you really care about, there are times where like they'll fight over the small stuff like, hey, why didn't you take the garbage out? And then the real reason why they're mad is something else, but they're making a big deal out of you not taking the garbage out. That's kind of what we're getting here. But what we're seeing also is that the normally closed off Mitaka is rambling because she's trying to talk through her true feelings that she's afraid to admit to. But we as readers have seen all the signs since the start of part 2 of Chainsaw Man. Mitaka is afraid of both being alone and having companionship. It's why she was so torn up over the situation with Bucky in the first chapter of part 2, and why as she laid there dying, she was filled with all these regrets, and symbolically, death is a journey that most of us take alone. We're born in this world alone, and we leave this world alone in most cases. And for Mitaka, the way she was dying was a way that was built on top of that fear. Someone who wants but is afraid of companionship was taking her last breaths alone, and look at the situation she was in. She had that nutty class president who was sleeping with her teacher, which while morally wrong was still a form of companionship. Two people in some form of a relationship to a degree. Again, not saying whether it's right or wrong, we can all agree it's wrong in my opinion, but in that moment, Mitaka saw both things and what would have been her final moments in this life actually being represented. Companionship in the form of the teacher banging the student, and loneliness as she lied there dying with only her regrets to keep her company. It really makes the most recent chapter flashback with Mitaka begin to make a lot more sense now. Her fear of being alone basically comes from the fact that the people she's lost in her life, they always leave her. Granted, it wasn't by choice since it was almost always death. Her parents died. That cat that got saved when her mother died, that cat ended up dying as well. Mitaka slowly throughout part 2 of Chainsaw Man has been losing things connected to her mother, from her uniform, where she had to strip down to make the uniform sword, to the cell phone that broke during the stuff with the attorney devil in that aquarium, and we'll continue to see even more things as this story progresses. Even her friendship with Yuko left her by dying, and Mitaka doesn't know that Yuko died. In her mind, she's just another person who left her. This explains why she was so let down when she thought that Denji stood her up. A want for companionship, but also a fear of companionship and a fear of being alone. Being rejected for a date by a guy that she liked, it all goes back together. It's then we move to a more twisted part of the chapter. The falling devil is pushing a food tray cart with a devil hunter on it with various injuries and his own tongue in a dish that he's being forced to hold up with on his feet. And we see the falling devil about to serve him up to a much larger devil, looks like a caterpillar. And as the devil eats the devil hunter, she says that the main dish is a Asa root Yoru, a human and war devil fusion, which now confirms what's going on right now has something to do with Yoru. So this chapter, I think we can definitely say that Fujimoto was cooking from the character development aspect as well as the disturbing imagery that he used. I can't speak for you guys, but I can say I definitely walk away from this chapter eager for the next one, which thankfully won't be a 2-week break. So we'll be able to see what's being cooked up in another 7 days. The interesting thing to see is where does Mitaka's character go from here, because it's great that we finally see her admitting her fears, and you can tell that her dealing with those fears buried deep within her own soul is going to be needed for the survival of herself and Yoru. But how Fujimoto builds on top of this is going to either add another layer to Mitaka or it's going to be a huge missed opportunity. However, I do believe Fujimoto is preparing to swerve us a little bit by using this battle as a moment to bring Yoru and Mitaka closer together, because so far in the series, despite the two of them literally sharing a body together, they don't truly understand each other. Even when they're working together, at times it feels like they're opposing forces. That line by Yoru saying that you don't have to fear me, it feels like it's there on purpose in order to set this up. There's going to be some type of a coming to Jesus moment between Yoru and Mitaka, and I think the falling devil might be the catalyst to start that. With Mitaka opening up, at some point we're probably going to see Yoru let something slip through the cracks as well, like we saw previously when she said, hey, bullying exists in the devil world as well, implying she might have been the weakest of the 4 horsemen and haven't been bullied as a result, which by extension explains why she's a tsundere. There's gradual layers being built on top of their relationship. Yoru has shown at times that she's protective of Mitaka, from warning her to stay away from Fami to stepping in a few chapters ago when she saw they were dealing with the primal devil. So we have seen some progress here, and I don't think it's just because Yoru needs Mitaka's body alive. Now, I'm not predicting we see a Denji and Pochita type of relationship, but I do think that we're going to be moving away from these two being at odds and just coexisting out of necessity and spite to something a bit more cohesive. As far as the falling devil, we clearly aren't on the level of creative horror that we saw with the darkness devil, where we got one of my favorite panels in all of manga, where when you saw the darkness devil and everyone was on the page with it, all the limbs and everything from the darkness devil were representing the page breaks. But there are small details of twisted humor and creativity by Fujimoto in this chapter with the falling devil itself. Like, take for instance the soup dish with the devil hunter being forced to carry. On my first read, I was thinking, well, the mouth is sewed up shut, so that's clearly the tongue that the falling devil was talking about. But this guy clearly has his nose, he has his ears, so where did that come from? Was it some random person? But when I paid closer attention to the panels before scripting the review, I noticed it. The devil hunters on the ground are missing a nose and they're missing their ears, which, at the risk of making a bad joke, the devil is clearly in the details here. Speaking of devil in the details, given the scale of how big this falling devil's damage is, having already killed a few devil hunters and Yoshida already learning about this devil via his conversation with Fami, I'm really beginning to wonder if we're going to see Denji, which if we do, I'm totally not prepared to see Denji relive that flashback of being forced to open up the door to see Power smiling behind it and Makima making Power go splat against the wall. But then again, our boy might see those breasts on the falling devil and turn horny enough that it keeps his mind off of that fear and trauma, in the same way that Yoru tried to use pain to do the same thing for Mitaka. However, my question for you guys is, do you guys think this chapter is setting up the rebuilding of Asa and the start of Yoru beginning to understand Mitaka more? While you think that over, click here to watch these other Chainsaw Man videos you see on the screen right now.